some extra information, overload of information about Israel, our trip, things we learned, things we saw, things that touched us, whatever. We probably won't get any of the touched us stuff from Andrew, but things that we learned maybe from all of us.
30 seconds in and
Yeah,
already.
we're slamming. We had a good time, and we got to know each other a little better than we did before. It's been good. Well, today I'm teaching Luke 3, and
Just did.
yeah, that's Wednesday, and I've already recorded the sermon. But Luke 3 is the baptism story of Jesus at the Jordan River. So I really wanted to talk about topography, why the Jordan River is more than just a river, more than just a water source, how it is a barrier. It really is symbolic to the people of Israel of being in the wilderness apart from God, or being in the promised land, living with Him in faith and provision. And so one of the things I thought we could open this up with is, Israel visually is probably not what anybody expects when you get there. So what are some things about the topography, the geography that really caught you guys' attention when you got to Israel?
I think for me was the contrast. I had, for whatever reason, a vision of desert everywhere. And that wasn't the case at all. I mean, there's definitely some desert, barren places, but there's also places that were just crazy lush and, almost tropical in a sense. And so I think just the contrast that you see and how quickly that contrast meets one another really stuck out to me while we were there.
Yeah, I think that to that point, the change in topography and different, even looks like different climate regions, just so quick, really stuck out to me. You think there's this gradual going into these different types of climates, and it's just within seconds, it seems like things change.
So would you say that it's true that, because when we were on our way there, Fred in particular kept saying everything is uphill, and I was like, okay.
That's because we're flatlanders, Midwestern, Corn Belt people that, a big hill's 200 feet tall.
Yeah, so that's the thing that I think stuck out to me. Is like he was right.
But let's be honest, when we were driving, we didn't notice that. Blumker was driving so fast, everything seemed downhill. But yeah, when we were walking, it did seem uphill.
Well, there was one moment where I was like, I believe I laid down, just laid down on a rock, because we were I had 35 pounds of camera gear in my bag.
I have a picture of that.
You do?
Yes.
That's great. You should delete that. So yeah, I think that's the thing that kind of stuck out to my eyes and feet.
I follow on YouTube a couple that I met through Fred Hastings' introduction. We met actually for a lunch.
What's their names?
Sergio and Rhoda.
That's right.
And they have a YouTube channel, and they did a video where they went through, I believe it's 5 climate zones in 6 hours. They start on Mount Hermon on the ski resort, and they go to the Dead Sea, passing through all those different climates in 6 hours. They ended up swimming in the Dead Sea, I think, at the end of that, from snow at the top to the bottom. So it is a very diverse thing. One of the most visually impressive things I saw in our tours this past time, on one of them, the desert was very, very, very clear. And we're in Jerusalem. We're in the old city of David. And I'm just walking behind the group, and I noted as I looked to the east that I could see the Dead Sea, and I could see the desert, and just the nothingness of the desert. Such a unique contrast.
The other thing that I thought was cool is everything was so much closer than I thought it was going to be. You just alluded to that, but it's like, man, you could just see all around you the different places, and yeah, it was crazy.
So if you're a Midwesterner, this might help you visually to take Route 70, which comes across St. Louis to Indianapolis, and Route 64, which is basically St. Louis to Louisville, Kentucky. You take that swath where it cuts across to Illinois, and you turn it up. That is about the size of Israel. So everything that we're reading about, all these different topographies, all the geography, the stories, Old and New Testament, in a pretty small piece of land. One of the significant things, and I talked about this in the message this weekend, about this location, and I believe, God chose this on purpose, is because the whole world at that time passed through this little swath of land. Asia, Europe, Africa, all passing through. And God's intention was not that this blessing, this choice relationship be just with Israel, but that they be a blessing to the world. Not just through Jesus, but through their obedience to him and his law, they would show people what it's like to live in relationship with him. And most of the time they didn't do very well at that. But that's why they're situated there in that little prime piece of real estate. Any other things to jump on what we saw? Favorite place to see? You went to Harball last time and a few things like that, but most visually stunning location.
I think the wilderness was just really cool. Like you said, it was really clear. You start to imagine Jesus being in the wilderness, and you can see like the reason why Satan would have tempted him with turning the stones to bread. I mean, it's just so barren. That was really striking for me. And then you can start to see the outline of Jerusalem in the distance, and there's just that was just really striking for me. I wasn't prepared for that, but it was really cool to see the just the barrenness of that. Starts to bring that story to life a little bit more.
I think going to Tel Dan, where the headwaters of the Jordan are, I think that there's that, what is it? Is it the city gate or that's under the pavilion?
Yeah, where Abraham went.
Yeah. Like, you talk about old.
Oh,
That's
man.
old.
Yeah.
And just the perspective you get of the story that God has written from then to now, and to visually see that, that was kind of one of those just, wow moments to really see it for real.
I believe Tel Dan is where Farley and I got lost.
Well, okay, we didn't get lost; we got left.
No,
That is true. You guys were slow.
we weren't slow. We were shooting a video.
We weren't paying attention.
Jeff was like, "Hey, we're gonna go this direction," and we were walking, and it said exit, and we were like, "Our emergency exit."
Emergency
And
exit.
we were like, they didn't go that
No
way.
chance they're going down that.
And
Yeah.
so we went like a mile in the wrong direction.
A mile.
It wasn't a mile.
Everything was uphill.
Everything was
Lebanon.
uphill, felt really
Uphill
long.
both ways.
Lebanon was less than a mile away.
Oh man! But Ben recorded a hysterical video right there that we have not aired.
Is there any way you can attach that to this?
Maybe we could pause it right here and show that video. But man, it was hilarious.
Are you going to do that?
We can't. Yeah, we can.
It's probably the best video I did during this whole trip.
Well, without a doubt.
I mean, maybe the best.
You
video
got to
ever
watch Ben
recorded.
shoot these videos. He's pretty picky about what he says and does. And he restarts. If he did one today, he started how many times? 8, 9?
Oh, I
at
lost
least.
track.
Yeah,
at
we
least.
just leave it rolling.
Yeah.
But no, when he's criticizing me, he shoots this thing one take.
First take.
I
One
told
take.
hin last week it's a spiritual gift.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, he can just
Creative criticism. He's good.
Creative, sarcastic videos are just what I'm great at.
they just flow out of you.
Oh, man.
But
All right, let's watch that.
okay, we'll put it in right
If
now.
that doesn't work,
Then we just won't.
let's pause for a second and we'll come back.
I'm standing here at Tel Dan on an empty trail. Obviously, there's nobody around. And I was just reminded of what God has said. He's told us that he will never leave or forsake us. And it's also in direct opposition to what Jeff has done, because he has clearly left and forsaken us. Be like God, don't be like Jeff.
All right, we're all laughing, right?
Yep.
Uh-huh. Funny,
Yep.
funny, funny. Thanks, Ben.
Yep.
Plenty more where that came from.
Well, let's talk about the Jordan River a little bit, because it's key in the story today. The Jordan River is the eastern barrier. It goes from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea, kind of separates Israel from Jordan currently. But it was that entry barrier to coming into the land of promise. First impressions of the Jordan River while you guys were there, what do you think?
It was cold.
That's because we were at Tel Dan, the spring-fed section. Yeah, very much so.
Now, one of the things that I found interesting is, and you can correct me on this ratio, but
I will.
He
Isn't
will.
the
After that, he will.
isn't the Jordan River now like way smaller than it used to be because they've diverted it for different agricultural investments and things like that. So I was really struck by the Jordan River itself in how dirty it was, just because of that same thing. They've diverted it, and in the process of that, I think they've used it to dump trash in, and so that was pretty.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was pretty
It
crazy.
is not what it was at the time of Joshua, for instance, in Joshua 3, leading the people across the flood stage Jordan. Way smaller. We didn't get to go to that location. We kind of plotted that out and tried to figure out how to get it done, but it was going to, people may not understand this, and I don't really get it fully yet, but in 1948, when the state of Israel was reestablished, it was divided up into sections, A, B, and C, and the control over those different sections, Israeli, joint, or Palestinian authority. And so that area where Jesus was baptized by John, where they crossed the Jordan to enter the promised land with Joshua, you can't go there easily, and you can't go there in a rental car. Even with Andrew driving, it was an hour and a half around, basically a gate that a tour bus can go through there because that's profit. But, like a 5-minute drive, we had to go all the way around. So we didn't go there. But if we would have went there, I've seen enough pictures and video, it's a muddy creek, basically today. But in the time of Joshua and Joshua 3's story, and it would have been Jesus too, although Jesus is probably not there at flood stage. But that may have been a mile wide where the water is flowing down through there. It's basically a giant flooded bottom, but the water volume is, I think, a third of what it used to
I
be.
thought that's what was told to us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were at Tel Dan, that's what I pictured the Jordan River being like. Obviously on a much smaller scale, but the water was flowing. It was fresh, and that was what I had pictured. So to see the Jordan River for what it was really shocking to me.
Yeah, we're going to share a video this week of you reflecting on baptism at Tel Dan there by the headwaters of the Jordan, and I think people will see that and go, "That's beautiful."
Yep.
But that's probably not what it was like where he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely loud and definitely powerful.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome place. Well, the Jordan was that barrier to getting into the land of promise. And reflecting on the story, I did all this background research of Jesus and the coming to the Jordan. I thought it was interesting. They wandered for 40 years in the wilderness, in the desert, and he follows baptism with 40 days of wandering and fasting. He enters into his ministry. All those pieces come together to help. I think we could understand baptism a little better when we understand its entrance into a new covenant, a new kingdom, and an eternal promised land.
Well, and you have to remember, too, like at this time, the Jews were not baptizing for the reason why Jesus is being baptized and what he's symbolizing in baptism. So they would have done ceremonial washings, and stuff like this, but the idea of salvation, of the Spirit, of repentance, of all these things being combined, that's a big deal. And Jesus is making a proclamation in his baptism of basically setting the cornerstone of the new kingdom. What you talked about, Jeff, the symbolization of him coming through the waters, being baptized, all righteousness being fulfilled, the Spirit descends, the Father speaks. You have all of that happen in one moment, and it's kind of the marker, in the dirt of the new kingdom being ushered out before them. And I think that's a really powerful picture. You just think about the Spirit and the Father and the Son, all in one moment, all, in unity after that baptism. Anyone watching that, I mean, how do you not share that,
One of the things I think is significant about our understanding of baptism in this story, though, is Luke tells us two things that are unique in the account. One, that Jesus, while praying the Father his sins, nobody else tells us that, but Luke has a huge emphasis, and we're going to see this throughout the study, on prayer. Jesus in connecting with the Father and praying. The second one is that he tells us that he is 30 years old at this point, and he begins, he says, his ministry, right? And so we know that's more than just the preaching and the teaching, the healing. He begins his work to fulfill what he came to accomplish. Baptism for us is more than just getting saved, right? I remember when I was growing up, got to get you saved. Well, it equated to got to get you baptized. It's more than that. It's an entrance into this thing we call the church, where we're the body of Christ, where we are ministers together in his kingdom serving. That begins visually, obviously, with Jesus and with us too. It's like a commissioning service, in a sense, to enter into ministry.
To me, one of the cool moments about this is I'm having trouble seeing it, 22, you are my son, who I love. I think this is the really cool part of this, because we just came from chapter 2, where Jesus is saying that he must be in his Father's house, and he's, for the first time, saying that I am the Son of God. Then you have the Father now saying, you are my son. Mm-hmm. And this variance there in that chapter just, man, it overwhelmed me just reading it this week.
That's powerful. Any other thoughts? Jordan River, baptism.
I think one of the key pieces that we often wrestle with is, can I identify with the person of Jesus, and can the person of Jesus identify with me? And I think Jesus's baptism is really that. He's beginning to identify with us. Now, clearly he is fully God, but he's also, as fully man, identifying with us. And it's that piece that, the heart behind that carries him to the cross. The cross is him identifying with our sinful nature and taking on our penalty. And so this is kind of the beginning piece of that. And it should show us that, hey, we have a Savior who has identified with our struggle. He's identified with our sin. But he also hasn't left us there. He's become the remedy for that. And it all kind of starts in this public declaration of, I'm doing the Father's will by identifying with the sin of the men and women I've come to save. So that's a big piece to that.
I think Jesus also sets the precedent here of baptism being, it is a personal thing, but it was never meant to be a private, and it's very personal in the sense that, like, it's between you and God, and it's a decision that we make, looking on this side of things, we make to choose to follow Jesus. The Spirit convicts us and calls us, and then we submit to that. And one of those areas is we submit in baptism, which starts our journey in following Jesus, but it was never meant to be a private thing that we hold to ourselves and never share with anyone.
And it's also not meant to be interpreted as an event or a moment that saves.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, as I sit here thinking about the two times that Israel approached the promised land, God said that's going to be yours. And they approached that land. And the first time they didn't have faith to follow. The second time God says, okay, this time I'm going to lead you. You follow me. And they, by faith, followed in. Think about the priest standing in the Jordan and it dries up. That's pretty awesome. But at the same time, there is a step of committal to say, okay, I believe this is going to stay this way. I'll go through. We're talking about a couple of million people probably.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow you through that water. But God said, I'm going to show you. I'll go first. The first time they come to the Jordan with the leadership of Moses and the 12, the spies come in. And we can't conquer these enemies. We can't. And they were right. But they didn't have to if they would have just followed the Lord. Mm-hmm. So you see that contrast. Baptism is not, I'll go take that enemy and conquer sin. I'll do this act to be righteous in God's eyes. That's not going to work. But I'll surrender and follow Jesus. I'll be obedient to him, and he will conquer for me my sin.
I think that's the really cool part about watching someone give their life to Jesus through baptism that's a little bit older. It's really fun and exciting to watch a young person give their life to Christ. It's not what I'm trying to say. But, Andrew and I were here last night as Ken gave his life to Christ. And Ken is, I don't know how old he is, but he's an older guy. and there was that hard.
He's older than you, but I don't think he's older than me.
I don't know. I don't
So
even know.
judgmental.
I don't even know how old you are. But man, it's just like I talked to him on the phone a few times leading up to this, and those words just kept coming, man. Like it's surrender. I'm giving all of me to Jesus, and it was just something special to watch. Every story is, but it was really cool.
Well, let's wrap this up and just tell people, hey, you can contact us. Probably the easiest way is through the website, christchurch.com. But you can contact us, and we would love to talk to you about your making that kind of decision. We would facilitate the best we could, as fast as we could, to making that happen for you in your life. We'd love to connect you to Jesus and to the body of Christ. So get a hold of us.
Yep.
christchurch.com.